Hey, Mr. Sorensen here, and today I'm going to introduce to you a Wood 3 project that we're going to be doing called the Marquetry Box. The Marquetry Box is going to kind of draw on your knowledge that you learned in the Wood 2 project, the wall hanging, and we're going to take that veneer concept and we're going to take it to another level. So as you see in the box in front of me, I have this box that has a picture on it. So now we're going to take some veneers, 4 different colors of veneers, and we're going to make a picture out of them and then put them together like a kind of like a puzzle on the surface of a box. We're going to laminate that like you did on your wall hanging to a substrate, and that's going to become the sides of a box. So now I have a box here that literally has pictures on the side. This one was a bit of an example, an experiment. This one has the Royal R with a sword. And so I'm in the process of making that and experimenting with it, seeing how it works. You're going to do a drawing that's a little bit simpler in this process. To start with, you're going to use the folders, right? All of our projects come out of a plan of procedure. You don't have to make it up yourself. It's already been done for you. All you really need to do is follow it. And one of your first jobs would be to look in the back. In the back are a series of pictures. The pictures have already been drawn. We're going to try to avoid drawing your own picture because it can be so complicated that it's impossible for you to be successful at it. And so by keeping it to some of these simpler pictures, we can have success. If you decided you wanted to go on and try it again and this time draw your own picture, if we see that you can be successful with it, we could go back and do that. So there are some pictures in here for you to choose from. You're going to pick one and take that out of the book. Again, you're going to follow the instructions here. One of the first things you do with that drawing is use a pair of scissors to cut it out so that you're ready to attach it to your set of veneers that you're going to use. The other thing you're going to need for the project is this box. So in this box, you're going to collect a series of veneers, right? And you need to pick 4 different colors. So I'm going to pick 4 different colors out of here that can be used for my my project. And the other thing I want to do is I want to pick 2 pieces of plywood. After I end up with my 4 sheets of veneer, then I'm going to sandwich those between 2 sheets of plywood. And I'm going to tape that all together, and that's going to let me kind of hold everything together as I'm cutting it on a scroll saw. Right, so I've picked 4 different veneer colors, right? Here's my 4 different veneers, plus I have a piece of plywood in the front, I have a piece of plywood in the back. I'm going to put all those together and I'm going to tape that. Okay, so I use a roll of masking tape, tear off a few pieces, and tape this together so that these pieces of veneer don't slide as I'm making the cuts. All right, the next thing that you're going to do is you need this spray adhesive. Now, in our other veneer project, we use contact cement. That contact cement you spray on, you let it dry, it permanently bonds. This is not meant to bond quite so strong, and it's also not contact cement, so you don't spray it on and let it dry. This is like glue. You're simply going to spray it on a surface and stick the thing to it. It typically will be in this box, so that's where you will find it when you're looking for it for your project. Like with the other contact cement, you want to do this in the finish room with the air on so that it's sucking all the overspray and the vapors out. Right here, I'll just do it very quickly on this piece of scrap paper so you can see what I'm doing. And I don't need very much of it. Again, this isn't the wall hanging where we're trying to make this permanently stay on there forever. I just need it to stay on there until I'm done with my cutting. So I'm going to take it like that, spray just a tiny bit of the adhesive on the back of it. You can feel it's kind of tacky. And then I'm going to set that on my pieces of plywood there and push it down. So, simple as that. That's where I'm going to start. Okay, so that's the first thing I do. I put together that little packet of veneers. That's ready to go back to the veneer, to the scroll saw and cut. We'll do that in just a minute. Before I do that, I'm also going to create the pieces of substrate. The substrate is either MDF or plywood, something that's going to go behind this. We're going to glue that picture when we've got it onto the substrate. So to do that, I'm also going to use, in this particular case, like I said, you could use MDF. We're going to use plywood right now for that. Check with me when you're ready to do this, and I'll give you the material that we have on hand. So to start with, I'm going to go back to the table saw, and we're going to rip this down into the sizes that we need for our sides of our box. Then we'll go over to the scroll saw, and we'll start cutting out this packet, and I'll show you how to do that. So come on back to the saws, and let's get started with the tools. All right, well, we're ready to cut down our side piece of plywood, and we'll start by setting the fence at 4 inches. Note, I've already found as well a bottom piece for my box, so that as I do this and make these cuts, I also know how thick the bottom material is going to be when I get to that step. So I'll show you what I'm going to do with that in a minute. First thing I'm going to do is set the saw at 4 inches. The height of the box is 4 inches going around. I'm going to raise the blade up so it's a little bit bigger than the piece of wood, and then I'm going to go ahead and rip this down. All right, that's done. Well, I'm now at the planer, and because I'm using poplar, I want to thin the poplar down just a little bit. It makes for a nicer feeling box. The box is not big and bulky, 3/4 inch pieces of wood all the way around. So I'm going to start at the planer by measuring the thickness of the material. That's 3/4 inch. And then I will set the planer to 1/16 less than that. And I'm going to go ahead and take this down to 5/8 inch. Now, if I'm using plywood, I'm not going to run it through the planer. I'll just skip this step and go on to the next thing, because we don't typically run plywood through a planer. But because we're using poplar on this particular project that we're building, or I'm using poplar on my particular project right here, I'm going to go ahead and plane this down a little thinner. When you build it, if you're using plywood as your substrate, you have to just use it whatever thickness it comes. If you're using poplar or another solid wood, then I would recommend that we plane it down to 5/8 at the maximum for the thickness of your box. Don't forget, I want to check the edge of the board when I go ahead and put it in here, and I want the grain of the wood going up and to the back. Now, the next thing that I need to do is, while the board is still in a big piece, I'm going to go ahead and rip a groove for the bottom material. So if you remember back to the Craftsman box we built in Wood 1,
We had a piece of masonite, 1/8 inch masonite. The groove went all the way around the inside of the box. We need to do that, use that same technique here on this box. So the best time to cut the groove in the box is right now. So I will set my board on the table and I'm going to drop the blade down. I want the blade roughly 1/4 inch high. So I could take a pencil and mark on the side of the board right here, put a line at 1/4 inch. Then I can set that right up here and raise my blade until the blade reaches the height of that 1/4 inch. That would be one way to do it. In this case, I'm guesstimating. When you cut a groove in a board like this for a bottom or for a shelf or for something like that, you want to make sure you never go beyond the halfway point. You should never cut a groove deeper than half the thickness of the board. So the height of my blade looks pretty good. I'm also going to move the fence over to 1/4 inch. So the bottom, according to our plan, the bottom is 1/4 inch up. So I'm going to come over here and I'll set this at 1/4 inch. And now I'm ready to make my cut. All right, now after making that first cut, I'm going to take my bottom piece and check it. And it doesn't really want to fit in the groove. The groove is not wide enough. This is about 1/4 inch stock. The groove is, right, the kerf on a blade is about 1/8. So it's going to take, at the very least, it'll take 2. And it's possible that would still be too thick or that would still be too thin. And so I'd have to make a 3rd pass. So I'm going to go ahead, move this over a little bit, and I'll make my 2nd pass. All right, I'll check my work again. Well, it's really close, but it's not quite. So I'm just going to move it a little bit further. And here goes pass number 3. All right, now I'm going to bring my material here and you'll see that now the piece of wood, the 1/4 inch plywood, fits down into that slot. So that tells me I'm good to go. And so now I'm ready to take this and go to the chop saw and cut it into my 4 7.5 to 8 inch blocks. So I'm here at the chop saw and I need to cut my pieces to about 7.5 to 8 inches, and I need 4 of them. So this is a perfect time for me to use a stop block. I'm going to grab the stop block off the wall here. I'm going to grab a push device in case I decide to use that, and I'm going to grab my clamp. So the nice thing about the stop block is I only have to measure once, even though I have multiple pieces that I'm actually going to be cutting. So I'll go ahead and make my mark at 7.5. I'm going to set it up so it's lined up right where it's supposed to cut. Now I'm going to slide my stop block up against it and I'll lock the stop block onto the fence right there using my clamp. Now from here on forward, I don't need to measure again. I'm just going to make my cut, slide the piece up, make the 2nd cut, slide the piece up, make this 3rd cut. The piece that I'm cutting is 7.5. The safety margin is 6, so I'll be able to hold on to this with my hand. I'm not going to need my push stick. All right, well now I've got my 4 pieces cut, so it's time to move on to the next step. So I've got my side pieces cut. The next piece I'm going to cut is this thin piece of plywood. Actually, it's not plywood. It's kind of a cover board made out of cardboard, and it's used to cover plywood when the plywood is delivered on a truck. It's actually got wood on the inside and paper on the outside. But this is a perfect throwaway material that we're going to use when we cut out our marquetry design. So I need to cut 2 pieces here so that I can sandwich all the different layers of veneer between the 2 pieces of, we'll call it plywood, 1/8 inch plywood. Alright, so there are my 2 cardboard pieces that I'm going to sandwich all the veneers between. I'm ready to sandwich the veneers and now head over to the scroll saw to cut out my picture. Well, I've got my 2 cardboard pieces ready to sandwich all the veneers between. So the next thing I'm going to do is I need to really cut the veneers down to the same size as my cardboard pieces. And so I'm going to lay the cardboard piece on top. I'm going to trace around it so I have the exact size. When I'm doing this, I don't really want, I'm not going to want anything overhanging the edges. And then I can use a utility knife and a ruler, right, a metal ruler. This wood is going to want to splinter if I just drag a utility knife over it. So I might want to put a ruler on it. Or I can just cut it with scissors. It works great with scissors. I guess I would probably go that route. That's the fastest, easiest route. Now, if when I start to cut it, the piece of veneer splinters and starts to get a crack in it, I need to stop and go back and get a new piece. Especially if it's lots of tiny cracks. If there's one larger crack, I might get away with that, right? I could actually put some glue in it, tape it. By the time I'm done cutting it all out, that might be glued back together and I might be okay. But in general, I don't want these veneers to be cracked or split. Any cracks or splits need to be redone. So essentially I would just throw that piece away and go get a new one. So be careful when you're cutting with the scissors. All right, well there's the last one. My pieces are all ready to go. And I have 6 or 7 pieces. I don't want to use just 4. The instructions typically would call for 4, but if I only have 4 colors, then I only get, that gives me 4 sides of my box, but I'm not going to have a big variety of different colors. The more colors you put into the picture, the more realistic and the more captivating the picture looks. If I just have 4 really plain colors, it doesn't look so good. So I would try to make sure you're doing at least 6 or 7 colors. Now I'm going to sandwich these between the 2 pieces of cardboard or plywood with the cardboard backing. And then I'm going to tape this together. And the key here for my success is going to be that I tape it tightly. I do not want this, once I start cutting, I don't want this to shift at all through the entire cutting out process.
I don't want these pieces of wood to shift. That will make it stick together, or it'll make it fit back together much better when I go to put the picture together on my box. If these shift around a lot while I'm cutting, then my picture is not going to fit very well together. There'll be gaps in between the different colors. All right, so there's now my block, or my packet of veneers with the 2 pieces of plywood sandwiched on each side of it to hold it all together while I go cut. Now I'm ready to make my cutting. Now I'm ready to go back to the scroll saw and do my cutting now that my packet is complete. So let's head back to the scroll saw. All right, well here I am at the scroll saw. The scroll saw is a saw that's used for really intricate cuts. And so this is a fairly small piece. We're going to cut that. We're not going to cut a lot of big, really hard woods with a scroll saw. The blade here is less than the size of a toothpick. Now the scroll saw has one key setup feature, which is a foot. Remember, the blade on a bandsaw goes in one direction. And so it's only pushing down on the table, not a lot needed. But on a scroll saw, the blade is going up and down like that. So if you don't hold the piece of wood down, the piece of wood is going to go up and down with the blade. So we have to put a foot on the blade, or we have to put a foot on the board to keep the board to rest on the table while the blade goes up and down. So here's the foot. That's my one adjustment. I'm going to set my piece of veneer, let it rest on it, and then tighten it back up. Now, a scroll saw has the on and off switch. It has back here a speed control, and up here in the front it has a tension adjust. So if I have to change the blade, after I get the blade in there, I want to make sure I adjust the tension and put a little bit of tension on the blade. The blade needs to be tight in order for this to work. If the blade has any flex to it, it's going to snap immediately upon starting. So I want to make sure it's got tension on it. The foot is adjusted correctly. I'm going to turn it on, and then I'll adjust the speed. The speed can be up relatively high. I'm checking down here. I've got good pressure on the foot so that my board doesn't lift up. And now I'm ready to cut. The one thing I want to look for is any lines that go completely across the picture with minimal sharp turns. Those are the ones I want to do first. So in this case, I'm going to start here and do this bottom line. It goes all the way across. I might do this little piece right in here, right? So no sharp turns. Then I would do this piece here. It does, if I include the cactus, it's going to have a sharp turn. If I just choose to ignore the cactus, I can go straight across and off the page. The last thing I'll come back and do is do the sun. I don't want to come across here on the mountain and then stop at the sun and try to go around it, right? No sharp turns if possible. All straight cuts, right? Even the sun, though it's a curve, it's a straight cut, right? I'm just going to start here, make one continuous cut, and out the other side. I don't have to turn a corner. So that's what we're looking for in the picture. So I'm ready to cut. I've got that set up. It's under the foot. I'm going to turn it on. Adjust the speed. Alright, so I cut all the way across and through. Now, very carefully, without letting any of the pieces of veneer slide, I'm going to stop, take that out, and now I'm going to retape that veneer packet. Now I've got 2 packets, right? This one I'm done with, right? That part is finished. There's no more cuts, so I'm going to set that aside. And I'm going to take my masking tape here, if I can find the end of it. I'm going to take the masking tape, and I'm going to retape the original packet that has additional cutting. I do not want to keep cutting without doing this, because the pieces will slide, and then
nothing's gonna fit back together. It won't fit like a puzzle and look like a nice picture. It's just a mess. So, all right, so I've come back and retaped it. Come over to this side, put a couple pieces of tape. All right, so now that's holding tight. Now I'm ready for cut number 2. Now let me say, I'm working as hard as I can at trying to follow the pencil line. This is a teeny blade, and it's gonna have a lot more flex than a bandsaw blade. So I'm probably not gonna get it spot on, but I wanna try to do the best job I can at following the line while not trying to twist the board at a 90-degree angle to get back to the pencil line. If I do that, I'm much more likely to break the blade. So I'm working hard at trying to just keep the general flow the same as the picture, while at the same time, I don't want to break the blade. And the more I turn at a 90-degree or twist too hard to try to get the blade to go back where I want it, the more pressure, the more tension it's putting on the blade, the more likely it is to break. Now, if I were to do the cactus in this picture, right, and I'm not going to do that in this particular case, I just want to give you an example of how I would cut this out. If I were to do the cactus, now when I get to the cactus, I have to make a sharp turn. And to go around the cactus is a lot more sharp turns. And then I'm going to do my best at trying to do that without breaking the blade. And I'm going to do that trying to follow the cactus as closely as possible. And this saw will do it. So once I get the hang of it, the saw will make some pretty intricate cuts, and I'm okay. But remember, the less 90-degree turns I make, the better off I am. All right, so there's another little piece that I cut off, so I'm going to go ahead and set that aside. I'm done with that. And again, I'm going to come back and tape it. Every time I cut, go replace the piece of tape that came off so that you keep this original set of veneers from sliding. Okay, now I'm going to make the horizon cut. It's got a little bit sharper turns in it, so I'm going to have to follow that. And then lastly, I'll come back and do the sun. All right, made it through that one, a little bit of a twist, but I made it through without breaking it. So anytime I can make it through without breaking, that's a good success. And again, I'm following the general flow of the line. I want to keep it from being just basically a straight line, or it's not going to look like a scene, right? It's not going to look like a wilderness or an outdoor scene, because outdoor scenes have lots of different cuts and shapes. So I have to try to make sure that I'm keeping with that scene. On the other hand, I'm having to balance that with not wanting to break the blade. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and tape this tightly back together again. This picture had a cactus on it, and I did just go ahead and cut that out. I left it out. I'm not going to do that. Okay, so now my final one is the sun. So now I'm gonna. This is a straight cut in a sense, because there's no right angles or sharp turns in it. I'm just going to start here, cut around, and I'm done. And the smoother that flow goes, the more it's going to look like a sun. If I let the bandsaw or the scroll saw blade wander off that curve and it becomes a different shape, like an egg shape, it's not going to look like a sun. So then I look at my picture and it's hard to tell that it's an outdoor scene. So I really want to try to make sure I keep this consistent as a circle. That's going to make it appear like a sun, and it's going to help show everybody that this is an outdoor picture, a picture of a horizon in a desert. All right, so just gentle and continual turning slowly. So you can see it there. There's my picture, and out comes the sun. Right? And it's a nice curve. It turned out okay. That's exactly what I want, right? Now, remember, I'm not gonna sand any of this stuff. It's gotta fit back together. So there's no extra sanding to try to fix any problems. You have to leave it exactly the way it all comes apart, right? But there, now I have all the pieces to my, I got all the pieces to my picture, and now I'm ready to go back to the next step and start to reassemble this picture. Well, I have my picture now that's cut out from all these veneers. And it's time to now move to the next step, which is going to be to start to create the actual pictures that are going to become the outside of the box. So the first thing I want to do, and I need to remember to do this, is get rid of the plywood, right? So now I need to untape the pieces and throw the plywood away. So we're not going to use the plywood in this process. So I'm going to take the plywood out and set that aside, right? I want to remember to do that, or your project is not going to come out looking all that great if you use plywood to make up the picture. So I need to remove the veneer, but get rid of the plywood. That's all trash now. So we're now ready to take these pictures that we've cut out on the scroll saw and put them together so they're ready to glue to the substrate, to the outside of the box pieces. And I am just untaping the last little bit here. And remember, we used a sacrificial piece, right? We used this plywood to hold it together and kind of keep all the veneers in good shape while we cut them. Now we need to remember that we want to throw this plywood that has the picture taped to it. That's got to all now be thrown away. Do not use that in the making of the pictures. So now you can see in front of me, I have these different parts. So here's all the different parts that have come out of the picture. There's how it all kind of went back together when it was originally in one piece. So now I'm going to start to separate all of these pieces out. So that I can mix and match them as I put them back together to create my scene. And I'll go ahead and do that for each of the pieces so that I can see what colors do I have to choose from as I put them back together. So I'm now ready to take my veneers and put them back together into individual pictures. And I want to make sure that each individual part is a different species or a different color of wood. I shouldn't have the sky and the sun be the same species, like walnut, or I shouldn't have the sun and the ground be the same species. Every different element in the picture should be a different color of wood. So I'm going to take one here that is walnut, and I'm going to put my sun in there. The sun is made up of Douglas fir. Then I'm going to take my mountain. I think the mountain might be hickory. Then I'm going to take the ground below that. That's mahogany. And then I'll come back with, there's another little mountain that kind of comes in from the side, and that looks like redwood. So I'll put those together like that. And now I'm going to do that on all 5 of the, or 7 of the pictures. However many veneers you used determines the number of pictures you make. If you use 4 veneers, you get 4 pictures. If you use 5 veneers, you get 5 pictures. If you use 7 veneers, you get 7 pictures, which is good, even though you have 4 sides of your box, because then you can pick the best 4 out of the 7 to use for the box. So I'll set that one aside, and I'll go ahead and start the next one. So there's mahogany as the sky, and I have cherry as the mountain. right? And I'll just keep doing this. I'll keep putting these all together like this until I've got all of the pictures put together, and then I'll come back and we'll move on. All right, I like that. That looks pretty good. Let me bring you over closer so you can see what the picture is looking like. Now that my picture is organized in the way I want it, the colors all look good, and I've taken a look at it and I like what it looks like. I'm now going to take this clear tape and I'm going to tape the picture together. And when I do that, the last little bit of tape I'm going to fold over, so I basically have a little handle that's not stuck to the veneer that I can peel this off after this is all done being glued up. So I'll take another strip and I'm going to put 4 or 5 pieces of tape across the picture, tape the thing right where it's supposed to be, and then the last little bit of tape I'm going to fold under. Now in this case I can feel that one of the veneers slipped under another veneer, so I'm going to take that off, and I didn't get it folded yet, so I can tell it's a little hard to get this to peel up. So I think what I'll do is I'll take that piece of tape off. It's too short, I'll throw it away, get a longer piece. And critical as I put these together that the pieces of veneer should not overlap each other, and if you're not careful they will. All the pieces of veneer should be sitting side by side. All right, there we go, got that one. Now, last little bit of tape, I'm just gonna fold the end of it. All right, another piece. So this is gonna hold everything together in order, aligned while the glue dries, as I try gluing this to the substrate. And then when they're glued to the substrate, once they're on there, then I'll come back and peel this tape off, get it off of there. Now, one of the things I'm noticing as I glue these together or tape them together is that sometimes I have to flip the veneer piece over, right? So I start to put the pieces together and I cannot figure out, boy, these do not fit. And I realize, oh, the sun has to be flipped over and now it will fit together. So make note of that. The veneer pieces should all fit together like a puzzle and make a picture, make a scene, as long as you have them turned in the right direction. So here's what it's going to look like to put the tape on. Want to make sure all the pieces are sitting flush next to each other. I'm going to set the piece of tape on it like that, so it covers several different colors. And then right here at the very end, I'm simply going to fold the tape like that back over the top of itself. So now, once this is all dry and it's glued onto the substrate, now that little tab, that little handle is still free, and I can go back and peel the tape off later on. So there's another nice looking picture. Some of the grain and different features of this piece of wood kind of make the sky look very interesting. So, all right, so I'm down, I need one more. Well, my pictures are done. Now I'm going to turn to masking tape instead of clear tape. And the next thing I need to do now is I need to glue each of the pictures onto the substrate or the piece of poplar that they're going to end up on. And I'm going to do that by taking the top edge of the picture and aligning it with the top edge of my substrate. And then I'm going to take a piece of masking tape like that and run it across that top edge. And I really want to make sure it's nice and aligned. And then I'm going to tape it on there like that. And that really becomes a hinge, right? So now that's aligned. I'm going to lift it up like that, apply glue with a glue brush, and then I'm going to fold it down and stick it in the vacuum bag that we're going to glue these with. So we'll see that next. Let me go ahead and finish taping all the pictures onto the substrate.
All right, so here we have our pictures that have all been taped together now, and they've been attached via this piece of tape or a hinge onto the substrate. That's going to allow me to very quickly put that back, put glue on it, fold that down on there, and get them right to gluing. The next step is a very interesting one. It uses what's called a veneer press, and a veneer press is actually a plastic bag that's going to act as a clamp, and we were able to use the plastic bag as a clamp because we put pressure on it through suction. We're going to connect a vacuum pump to this plastic bag. We're going to pump all the air out of that plastic bag, and it's literally going to put 20 pounds of pressure down on this veneer. It would be difficult to try to clamp this veneer with individual clamps since we have all this really thin veneer, different thicknesses, all different shapes. But with a veneer press, with this plastic bag that's going to work as our clamp, we're easily able to do it. So let's go take a look at the veneer press and what it looks like to actually clamp this down with the glue in it and get it drying. Here's the vacuum press. Here is the clamp that we're actually going to use to clamp all these parts together. Now I know what you see here on the table doesn't look like a clamp, but it is. So we have a giant plastic bag. Using this little piece right here, we are able to seal the plastic bag. That's kind of like a giant Ziploc for a Ziploc bag. And then over here we have a pump that's going to suck all the air out of the plastic bag through this hose. And when it does that, it's going to put pressure. So it puts close to 20 pounds of pressure down on our piece of wood and the little picture that we have glued on there, and it'll hold it there until, right, we need to set it. Glue dries in about 45 minutes, so we'll let it sit for about 45 minutes before we take the pieces out of the bag, and our picture, our veneers, should be laminated or glued to our substrate. So here's what we're going to do. What it requires is our glue setup and our clamp, our substrate with the pictures hinged on them. You need a couple of one or two or three plastic bags like we keep our supplies in. What we're going to do here is when I get glue on this, I'm going to put it inside this bag, and that's going to keep the glue off of this bigger clamp bag, right? It just prolongs the life of this clamp bag without getting glue all over it. So I'm going to put my pieces in here, and you might be able to get 2 pieces in one bag, so at the minimum you're going to need at least 2 of them. If you can only get 1 into the bag, you might have to use 4. So now I'm going to open up that piece. I'm going to put some glue on it. Once I get to this point, I need to move quickly because now the glue is starting to dry. So if I prolong this and I make it go on and on and on and on, by the time I put all of this in the veneer bag, the veneer press, to actually start drying, the first picture is almost dry, and that could cause a problem. So I want to do all this as quickly as I can. I'm going to spread that glue around, make sure the entire surface is covered. Any place left dry means that part of my picture could chip off. So I want to make sure that I've got glue on the whole thing. And once the whole picture is covered, then I just simply close my piece. Now, you'll see the glue starts to ooze through. The other issue is, now I've got glue or water on one half of the piece of wood. Just like a sponge, we've talked about this in all of our classes, just like a sponge, that's going to start to expand. And I should start to see this picture curl up like that on the edges. I want to try to beat that, right? I don't want this thing curling, and so I've got to do this quickly. So I'll be back with you in a second. At this point, I'm going to quickly try to get all of this glue in here. All right, just gonna hold this up and kind of show you. I don't know how well you can see it, but I want a pretty good amount of glue on there. I don't want to do this very dry, or by the time I'm all done, some of my veneers are not gonna stick. So I need to make sure I've put a decent amount of glue on there. Some of it's gonna ooze out. We'll get rid of that all in the process of finishing up the box. Once the glue's on there in a pretty good thickness, shut that. Everything looks like it's as tight as it can be, and then I'm going to set these 2 additional pictures in one of these plastic bags. So now I'm ready to start the vacuuming process. So I need the pump hooked into the plastic bag. You can see the little hole right here that allows the air to be sucked out. I'm going to set my 2 bags of veneer into this plastic bag. And if you have other people working with you, you could put 4, 5, 6, 7 different bags in there. Now I'm going to fold this end over. And I actually want to wrap it around this little white piece. And then I take this little black piece and I push that little white piece down into the black piece, and the piece of the plastic bag should be sandwiched in between the two, and that's gonna seal it off. Now, I have a couple pieces of wood, and oftentimes what we need to do is we need to create a way to keep the bag from just simply sucking shut around the opening. Once it sucks shut here at the opening, it's not going to suck anymore out here. So at times we need to keep these other little pieces of wood in here to try to hold that open so that we get a continuous suction on the bag. And once I have the bag sealed, now I plug the pump in. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to use one of these drop-down plugs, and I turn the bag on. And what we should be able to see is you can see the bag starting to suck down around our plastic or around our parts. Something that can speed it up just fold that out. We don't really need a lot out here. That concentrates the work of the bag right around our pieces. And you should be able to see it starting to suck down around all of our parts. So I just look for some consistent movement here. I want to see if things are pulling down tight. right there at the very end. We kind of saw the bag really suck up tight around those blocks. And when I look over here at our pump, it says that there's about 12 pounds of pressure pushing down on all these parts. So that's pretty good. That's a good amount. It's going to keep the pieces all pushed flat onto our substrate. And if we give it about 45 minutes, those things should be fully dry and really flat on that substrate, so we can sand off our picture, smooth everything out, and move into actually assembling the 4 sides into a box. So we'll come back in about 45 minutes and pick up where we left off.